what we wanted to do is tell a story, right? If we're gonna really get people to pay attention and to engage with us, we had an incredible collection of kids' art that we collected, some as far back as 40 years ago when that program originally started. And we had been collecting and showcasing and celebrating children's artwork. But now we're actually turning it into a narrative that we want other people to see, and we want other people to join and celebrate with us.
This is My Best Campaign. I'm Amanda Lee Smith, the CEO and co-founder of Monday Creative. If there is one common experience that's probably shared by every kid in North America and maybe globally, it might be the feeling of cracking open a fresh box of crayons. If you were lucky, it was the 64-count Crayola box, you know, the one with the sharpener in the back. What an innovation. The smell of a box of crayons elicits, honestly, a Pavlovian response for me. I instantly feel the shiver of creative energy just running through my body. Now, imagine it's your job to capture that feeling and share it with the world. That's what today's guest has been doing for more than 15 years. Victoria Lozano is the Chief Marketing Officer at Crayola. She started in 2009 as VP Marketing after spending time at Cadbury and Pfizer, where she managed brands like Dentyne, Trident, Bubblicious, and Chiclets, pretty much the full gamut of breath-freshening brands. And today she oversees Crayola's absolutely massive marketing portfolio, including their location-based experiences, which are essentially Crayola theme parks for the whole family. She also oversees their growing portfolio of IP, including an animated series called Pablo about a little boy with autism, and the Crayola Crew YouTube series. I mean, there is just so much in her remit. Something we talked about a lot in this episode is creativity. It's the heart of their current campaign, and she gives a really great definition of creativity, the idea of putting imagination into action. And she reiterated to me that everyone is creative. And ever since I spoke to her, I've been thinking so much about creativity as a muscle that needs movement and constant exercise to keep it from atrophying. And I'm increasingly convinced that strong creatives need to exercise their creativity every day, making it a practice that doesn't need to have a set outcome. The results don't have to be amazing. Drawing and coloring with crayons in particular sort of makes it feel like the stakes are really low and takes away the expectation that you're going to create a masterpiece. And I just might incorporate crayons into my own creative practice. What else did I take away from this episode? Well, I think it's a lesson in coming back to a central purpose. This is the first time I've talked to someone who's running a multi-year campaign with multiple chapters. And I think that's only possible because everything Crayola does is rooted in one central idea that everyone has bought into. And it was totally clear that Vicky is a believer. If you're not watching the video, one, I recommend it, but two, Victoria joined me from her office, which has a Crayola purple wall. There's Crayola art, and she's even wearing a Crayola branded tee. She is truly living this brand, and you hear it when she talks. She believes in this and has been living it for 16 years. It's a great model for how a CMO probably should feel about the company they work for. And to start, I wanted to know how she got here.
Well, I actually had a little bit of a non-traditional path into marketing because I went the usual route. I did get my marketing undergrad degree and eventually my MBA, but I actually ended up going international after graduating, and I did initially some internships, and then I actually moved out and lived in Puerto Rico, work as part of the Latin America region for the Clorox company. And I got a really incredible brand management experience at a time where you couldn't really get into brand management without having an MBA. And that was my unique path by having gone international instead of starting out my career in the US. So when I actually moved back to the US, I went into the brand management path and ultimately worked on a variety of different businesses, portfolios, part of several large Fortune 500 companies. And very much a combination of that marketing / GM track that is so common within the CPG industry. And then when I was making my career change to Crayola, what really attracted me is just the purposefulness of the brand and kind of that general feeling that if I apply my skills, I apply my experience, and I do well in my job, something better happens in the world. In terms of the value that Crayola provides, both in terms of play, but also learning and development for kids. And so that seemed like the perfect match. And here we are 16 years later.
Take me back to that international element. Is it just that the competition isn't as stiff? Like, why is that, for those that might be thinking they want to follow a similar path, why is that a better path, or why wouldn't you need an MBA in that route?
Well, it just, I think sometimes there's, different markets that have different requirements. And at the time in the US, the only way to get into brand management was an MBA degrees because that's the only, major companies, they only recruited out of MBA programs. And it was just very, very difficult to break through. I went international for actually personal reasons. It was not, I have to admit, sometimes it's just luck. I moved for personal reasons and was fortunate enough to have this opportunity. And when I got into brand management, I always had known that I wanted to do marketing, but perhaps, but I really got exposed to brand management specifically as part of my internship actually out in the Pacific region based out of Guam with Miller Brewing Company. And I said, I really love this. I love brand marketing and I got to figure out how to get in. Like I said, and I subsequently moved personally on personal reasons to Puerto Rico and was just fortunate enough to have this opportunity where you really just there weren't at the time, at least, quite as many structures or requirements. And they were just looking for smart people who really wanted to do that kind of work and who were willing to be creative and hardworking and really focus on driving these brands. And of course, to my story about luck, I also happen to have been hired, what are the chances, on a business that was being acquired from at the time by Clorox from P&G. And there was a business with a tremendous degree of heritage in Puerto Rico. The brand was called Less Oil. And it was very, very rooted in the culture, in the usage. And what are the chances? They wanted someone who had a fresh perspective, who didn't grow up with it. So here I come, happen to be in Puerto Rico and happen to be looking to get into the field and not having grown up with Less Oil. So all things lined up and I ended up working for Clorox before I eventually moved back to the New York area and started out my career path at the time with Warner Lambert when Warner Lambert still existed.
Amazing. Were there any language requirements for working in Puerto Rico? I know you're Russian, if I'm not mistaken. Did you have to have
Yes.
like working Spanish to be there?
Well, ironically, no. The business language in Puerto Rico was English.
Great.
So believe it or not, going to the supermarket was a whole other challenge. But in terms of the business language, believe it or not, I actually had a little bit of an advantage because all the decks, all the presentations, all the written communication was in English. So thankfully, I was able to integrate and no issue.
Well, you've been at Crayola for an incredible 16 years. I don't think many people have tenures in one company for that long. Mm-hmm. When you look back on your time there and all of the campaigns that you've touched in a decade and a half, what are the ones that you feel most proud of?
Well, actually, a big part of my career here with Crayola is that I've done a number of different things that were not always in the traditional kind of realm of marketing. And I think that's what sort of made that path a little bit unique, but also diverse enough that has really allowed me to really get very different experiences, but also kind of build to the role that I have now because it's kind of cumulative of all of those experiences and building the brand in the bigger way. So I started out with Crayola in kind of what you would call a typical marketing role, overseeing all of the marketing across the brand. About 2 to 3 years in, the president at the time had asked me to take on and go and build our location-based entertainment business, which is the gated attractions and retail stores, which at this point we're evolving and building a portfolio, but at the time was specifically focused on Crayola experience locations. So I actually went and did that, and that required not only staying and being very clear about it from a brand perspective. You had to really build the experience and what that actually, how do you curate, how do you create? You had to kind of figure out the operational and the financial model, and then you actually had to run these locations. And so I did that for a number of years on working on the LBE business. And then I sort of came back into the more traditional marketing, so to say, and then began and got re-engaged again on all of on the brand side and the activation side. And when you kind of look at my responsibility now, it's inclusive of all those things. So it is what you would typically think of activation, the way that you talk to the consumer, the way that you really position the brand. But it also includes other parts of that ecosystem and P&L, because a number of these are revenue generating businesses with location-based entertainment or interactive business, or what we do in education focused on creativity in the classroom, or what we do with partnerships and promotions. All of that sort of is the Crayola ecosystem and universe. And, and right now, like my focus is holistic on how does Crayola show up across all of those touch points. So back to your original question, which is a long answer, is to say there's a number of pride points for me, because each of those individual kind of areas, I have something to be really proud of. But holistically now, what it allows me to do is to really look at this as an ecosystem and as a collection of 360-degree touch points across, where Crayola shows up across products, experiences, and content, in the way that elevates and builds a more holistic relationship with the consumer, be it a child, be it an adult, be it a parent, be it an educator, and enables us to put it all together in a way that, the different pieces talk to each other, and they're synergies, and then they're cohesive.
Yeah, it's so rare, I think, for one person to understand so many different aspects of the business from a marketing and brand perspective the way you do. And because you got to lead and touch all of those different aspects on your way up to this role, I feel like you really have a specific understanding of each of them. Let's talk a little bit about location-based entertainment, because it's so rare and special, and not that many brands can do it. I mean, I think like we think of Lego and Legoland. That's sort of like the sort of probably pinnacle of what it looks like. What does LBE, location-based entertainment, look like for Crayola specifically?
Well, what it looks like today is actually a flagship concept that's called Crayola Experience, which is really all designed to sort of curate and deliver incredible, immersive, hands-on experiences for the whole family. So it's meant to obviously design to target kids, but also the range of kids, because you want to be able, a 5-year-old to enjoy it, but you want a 10 or 12-year-old brother to be able to enjoy it as well. And you want the parents to be engaged and involved in the creative experiences, because at the end of the day, it's a perfect opportunity to help make family memories, right? So it really is, all of that is part of the experience. And what it allows us to do as a brand is to help showcase the incredible range of products and experiences that we offer. When we first started building out this business, most people used to say, I don't understand how you build an attraction on crayons. And then they would actually go through this. And there is a number of experiences that are very much kind of paying homage to crayons, and they're very, very fun. And in fact, they tend to be some of our favorite attractions. But most people walk out and they say, I had no idea you guys made all this stuff in terms of different experiences, technologies, products, and it's an opportunity to kind of really, curate it, to show it, to let people experience it, and hopefully walk away going, wow, that was really fun. I want to do more of that. And whether they can come back to a Crayola experience, or whether they go home and they have more of those creative experiences at their kitchen table, okay, whatever you want to do. But I think for us, it's creating and kind of elevating that role of the brand. And I think that's really been a core part of our premise. Now, going forward, Crayola is a brand that is incredibly well-defined, but also incredibly broad. And we're looking at different types of people can experience. Can you experience color through all your senses? Can we design an experience that's all about the joy of hands-on creativity for adults? Can we design something that is really a traveling experience around some of our IP that is more interactive and fun and more character-based? So when you kind of think about it started with, should we be an LBE and what does that look like? We are an LBE. We know how to operate. We have actually a way that we can actually give it to a partner and be able to scale it at a faster pace, which is what we're doing internationally through licensing partnership with some really, really incredible partners. And then going forward is like, what is the broader portfolio and how does the Crayola and creativity and color can show up in these experiential locations and ways that we can engage across various demos. So that's the richness of kind of, from the little humble beginnings to where we are today to also where we're going. And I think it's just amazing that Crayola brand can support that breadth of opportunities and that breadth of both target, demographic targets, as well as that breadth of experiences under the brand umbrella.
Amazing. I mean, it's so broad and the possibility seems really endless. Those are a huge investment. You're buying property, you're building them out, you're creating all of these experiential moments. We know now that this is a profit driver for the business, but obviously when you were kind of just stepping into this, you had no idea whether or not it was going to take, whether or not it was going to generate revenue. Was there any fear or resistance stepping into that? Like, what were the potential risks that you were having to weigh?
Yeah, no, well, I think that this business, and by the way, I actually happen to think that's an importance for everything we do in marketing is I think it has to do two things. It has to build the brand and it has to actually drive revenue. Now, some businesses are going to drive it directly, such as that, because they will have their own P&L. Some businesses really just drive it through increased turn rates and increased kind of takeaway and pull out your product. But I think collectively, it always should do that. You got to build the brand. And as I say, especially with a brand like Crayola, leave it better than you found it, which sometimes could be a little intimidating given how strong the brand is. But also how do you continue to drive revenue? How you continue to kind of elevate the business, the business part of the equation. And I think on location-based entertainment, a lot of conversations early on do we want to do this? What are the key things? What has to be true for us to be successful? And we made a very, very conscious decision early on. Despite the potential risk implications, that we wanted to do early locations on us owned and operated because we really wanted to make sure we were not ready to just hand over our brand without really knowing how this space worked, what made it tick, what the concept was, and how it should be operated. So we made a very conscious decision to invest in that, to be able to really develop that expertise and develop that capability internally. And that did involve, to your point, that obviously time, it required capital and required commitment to stay the course. But I think if you sort of fast forward to where we are today, right, we have several locations that are open and operating. As we have tremendous partners that now can lean on that expertise that we've developed, and we can support them as needed with standard operating procedures, whether it's conceptual design, whether it's we can help support what they need to be able to do in the way that we feel highly confident that we've controlled for how the brand is going to show up. So it was a very purposeful set of choices. So this is not a real quick, I would call, opportunity. This is really a commitment and a capability. And we had the senior management aligned that this is something that was important for the brand, that we were going to do it brand right. And we were okay kind of, not hitting a home run on the first time, but be really gradual and purposeful about how we did it, because we wanted to develop it into something that had, legacy and had ability of, to work over the next quarter century, not next quarter.
Yeah. You, I think, have been around for the entire journey of that. From initial conception to opening the doors of the first location, how much time did you invest in that? How many months, years was that?
Yeah, well, I know there's been some folks here where they were working on things behind the scenes and really kind of fleshing out, the initial thinking. But once I was asked to join, admittedly, some early decisions had already been made. But I think from decision is, yes, we're going to go do it. What does that look like? What has to be true? How, what's the capital? I think it was about 18 months. Yeah. Is when we opened our first location. And we did have actually a location that was in our hometown that was actually a community affairs project. But at least we had a building. Like we didn't have to go get a new facility. So it was really focused on let's use that as a proof of concept. Let's redesign it. Let's reimagine it. Let's really kind of prove out the experience the way that, like, as at the time our president used to say, what if we did it for real? Like, take it from a community affairs project, which was wonderful, but take it into a full-fledged brand building, facility. What would it look like? And so those 18 months is what it took us to be able to really reimagine it, rebuild it, and then reintroduce it. And then we went on and from there added additional locations and continue to optimize the model, continue to really work on the formula, so to say.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like this has been really led and driven by brand and marketing, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. Often something like this, I think, could have a real retail focus or be led by a retail team. What do you think are the advantages of having it be led by brand and marketing instead of retail?
Well, I think first of all, I think it all depends on the objective that you're going after. And our objective was very much first build the brand, second build the business, right? And they needed to work together. All of that, there's definitely a retail component that is part of it. And you have to have some of that discipline around, as they say, retail is detail, and you got to work a lot of those details on assortment, on pricing, on merchandising. All of that is also a capability we had to kind of learn, even if it's just for our own handful of stores. But we really needed to operate that way because some of our locations are in malls. And that means that if you're in a mall, it's not just a souvenir shop. It's also just a regular retail store where folks can come from the mall and shop. And that comes with its own set of expectations around assortment, the merchandising and pricing and all those kinds of things. So we honestly had to learn all of that as an organization and to develop that capability. Which is why it was not a real quick journey. But now when you look back at it, we as a brand, we as a business have that as an additional expansion and a growth opportunity that is global, right? Wow. And allows us to not only reinforce the brand in markets where we are already present, but it also allows us to introduce a brand in markets where we might not have a strong foothold yet, and we're going to be expanding. And it gives us a way to introduce the brand in a very experiential way that just completely elevates its presence, its equity in some of those markets where we're just beginning that expansion effort. So again, I think that it all sort of works together, right? If you do it right, it should all work together.
Yeah. Had Crayola ever had any owned retail spaces before this, or was this the first foray into your own retail space?
Crayola has never had standalone retail stores. We did have like a test concept maybe 20, 25 years ago, but it was also had an experiential component to it. This was really a first time we've ever done this kind of an attraction, this kind of a retail store. So frankly, a lot of the capabilities and a lot of processes had to be established. And a lot of the capabilities had to be learned.
Do you think that doing something like this is sort of the unique privilege of a global, privately owned brand that has such huge household recognition? Is there something in there that smaller brands can learn from and apply on a smaller scale? How would you advise someone with a smaller brand if they wanted to do something experiential?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, and this is now so simple, but be really clear on what you're trying to accomplish, right? If you're doing this purely as a marketing initiative and you're using that as to launch a new product or service, or you like that looks very different than you're doing it in order to actually stand up a viable business, right? And so I think first of all, be really, really clear on what the end goal is. And then I think at the end of the day, it's not so much around whether you're a big business or you're a small business. Ironically, the Crayola brand is actually much bigger than the Crayola business, just because we are so ubiquitous, right? But I think it's really about making the right decisions around what's the experiential design, what's the value to the consumer, what's that experience, and is that something that are you developing something that you want to develop, or you're developing something people will actually want to do, right? And if your brand is in the position, and and admittedly, not every brand sort of makes sense, right? But if your brand is in the position to deliver an experience that is truly unique and valuable to the consumer, then yeah, there's no reason why you couldn't. And whether you do it yourself, whether you actually work with partners. You just have to kind of figure out what makes sense as the economics. But I think first and foremost is really around be clear on what you're looking to accomplish, and be clear on what is it that you're delivering to the consumer. Don't just worry about what you want to do, but why would they want to come? What's the experience? What's exciting about it? Why are they going to tell their friends about it? And can you deliver something that actually is meaningful? And if the answer is yes, then other things can fall into place, and then it becomes just an exercise of figuring out what has to be true to make that viable.
Absolutely. I feel like some of those rules you just laid out probably start to answer my next question too. So the other fascinating thing, which you've alluded to, that Crayola is doing is creating original content through Crayola Studios. Obviously, we've seen huge success of other brands doing this, like brands like Lego, Minecraft, Barbie. What does this look like for Crayola? And how does the brand make content distinctly their own?
Well, I think for us is, the Crayola brand is really grounded is this notion of that creativity is essential, right? And creativity matters, and creativity is powerful. And content allows us to showcase the power of that creativity through content. So creative, a lot of times creativity isn't actually a lot of times, if not most times, it's not just about the output and what you create, but it's actually around the process, and it's helping you develop for kids, it's developing a creative mindset, right? It's learning some of the creative behaviors that hands-on creativity teaches you. Looking at, many possibilities, learning from your mistakes, trying to problem solve. Those are the kinds of behaviors that can be showcased in content, right? In your storylines, and the way that you kind of show it, and the way you celebrate a creativity. Creativity for adults is a lot about just the joy of actually doing it. It's not about whether you're going to create a masterpiece that is worthy of being judged. In fact, it's the opposite. It's not about the masterpiece. It's just the joy of creating. So can we kind of celebrate that, right? And kind of showcase that in content. And I think those are the kinds of opportunities that are really interesting to be able to do. We are in the process of developing a slate. We have actually a couple of projects that we have announced that are in production, including Pablo Next Level. That is a series that we are developing a partnership with BBC, and it's really focusing on this idea of celebrating the creativity and creative thinking, featuring an autistic child, and his unique perspective on the world, and his ability to just ask the why, but why not, and what if. And so I think those are the kinds of examples that really kind of showcase and help us bring creativity and creative behaviors to life through content and through storytelling, really.
Yeah. Is Pablo, it's an animated series?
Correct.
Well, you're in the middle of a campaign right now, and I know it's something you're talking about a lot. It's called the Campaign for Creativity. It's a multi-year effort, which I think is something special and rare. Not many brands get to do multi-year campaigns, and there's so many components. There are celebrity creative conversations. There's school curriculum. You talked about partnering with teachers. There's the art return, which, if I'm not mistaken, there was an art exhibit that Crayola did years and years ago, and you're reconnecting the original creators now that they're adults with their pieces, and it's resulting in these really beautiful video pieces. Walk me through all the many branches that go into a campaign like this, and what's the central idea behind it?
Sure. Well, all of those things that you mentioned are really part of our Crayola campaign for creativity. And it's a campaign that we launched last year and is continuing this year. And we're going to continue for the foreseeable future, if not forever. It really stems from this belief is Crayola was really grounded and founded on this belief that creativity was really important. And we've always believed it. We've lived by it as a company, but we had not always been very extroverted and communicating it. And so this was really just a campaign that stemmed from something that's always been true, but it really our way of more explicitly, more vocally advocating for what creativity is and why it matters and how to actually help nurture it. Believe it or not, whenever I talk to people about creativity and I say, well, creativity, what creativity, what is it? Do you know what it actually stands for? Everybody always says, well, of course I know what creativity is. And I ask, okay, so tell me. And it's usually about 2 to 3 sentences. And sometimes it starts with, well, it's kind of like this. And what I found it really interesting is that sometimes it could be a little nebulous. I kind of know what it is, but people sometimes struggle defining it in a really concise way. So we started with something very simple is let's define creativity. Let's define what creativity is. And Crayola defines it as creativity is putting your imagination into action. Very simple. And whenever I say this to people, people go, oh yeah, that makes sense. And when you think about creativity as putting your imagination into action, you can kind of see how it could translate to some of all these things that we've just talked about, right? And what we're doing as part of Campaign for Creativity is really trying to elevate the overall societal conversation around why creativity matters, and also help overcome, whether it's parents for their kids or whether it's adults for themselves, overcome some of these really real practical barriers that sometimes people have that sort of prevent you from saying, hey, I believe in something and I get it, to I'm actually going to action it and I'm going to do something different as a result. So our goal is to really kind of create that dialogue, is to elevate it and really make people realize just how incredibly important it is. It is not about artistry. No, kids do not naturally grow out of creativity. We tend to actually unconsciously unteach creativity as we focus on these hard skills that we need to teach our children. As people age, they tend to get more conditioned to this judgment that now as I grow up, I can create as a kid without worrying about it. But as an adult, I now have to have certain standard of quality. And there's this judgment that comes in that what you're doing not only has to be good enough, but also that your time must be productive. And therefore, doing something that's just because you enjoy it becomes sort of wasteful, right? So that's what the campaign combats. Creativity is essential. Creativity is powerful. And the easiest and the best thing we could do is just to give ourselves or our kids the time and the space to simply enjoy it, because it's the process of doing that enables you to really either develop that creative mindset as a child or to feel that sense of joy as an adult. And we started this campaign last year. And it started with the art return. What we wanted to do is tell a story, right? If we're going to really get people to pay attention and to engage with us, we wanted to tell a story, and a compelling one. And we leaned into something that was very unique for Crayola to do, nobody else could do. And that is, we had an incredible collection of kids' art that we collected, some as far back as 40 years ago when that program originally started. And we had been collecting and showcasing and celebrating children's artwork. And, back to the whole point, I was like, hey, we've always done this, but now we're actually turning it into a narrative that we want other people to see, and we want other people to join and celebrate with us. So we went on the mission. We sort of opened up our creativity archives. We had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of that original artwork, and we embarked on the search for some of those original artists to find them and be able to reunite them with their childhood artwork. And we've actually found quite a few. We're still continuing to search, but our campaign had this particular part of the campaign last year actually won a great deal of awards, culminating in 3 bronze can lions over the summer. So that was our chapter 1, and really kind of celebrating children's art and also telling the stories of these now adults, that they're able to look back on their childhood and tell us what that experience was like, what creativity meant to them as kids, how creativity shows up in their life today, how they're nurturing with their own children, and really sort of creating some storytelling around that. So that was chapter 1. And now we're just very recently, we launched chapter 2 of the campaign, which is which we call Creative Acts of Color, which now also adds a little bit of additional narrative into the story around how color helps inspire you. And we launched this particular chapter with a very special child. Her name is Cadence. She lives in Texas, and we asked her to create a piece of artwork. And she got a canvas, and she got a box of 64 count crayons. And we said, we just want you to use every color. Other than that, you do whatever inspires you. And, Cadence to us was sort of kind of representation of all kids out there, and just an ability to think freely, ability to use creativity to express your emotions. She talked a lot about wanting to inspire others. And we just really wanted to give her that opportunity and to give her a chance to be the voice for this particular stage of the campaign. So Cadence created this incredible drawing. And I have to admit, I was a little nervous because I'm not sure what we're going to get, but I believe we're going to get something incredible, and we did. And that piece of artwork was sent out to a bunch of artists around the world, as well as posted on social. And we had these artists and creators, as well as just regular people around the country and the world, submit their creations that were inspired by Cadence's artwork. So this last week, we actually launched a film that was celebrating and telling the story of Cadence creating this piece of art, and what that art had gone on to inspire, and the reveal kind of video where we surprised Cadence with a collection of all of that art, so that she can also see what she sort of kind of started, right? It's a domino effect, and what she inspired around the world.
And is the idea that any kid would see themselves in Cadence and see what's possible when they
absolutely, absolutely. It's really kind of showcasing this idea of how powerful creativity can be, both to express yourself and your emotion, but also to be able to inspire, yourself, and to inspire others around you. And it could really be this, this bigger campaign, and the bigger social call around people just engaging with creativity, helping their kids engage with creativity, helping create and pursue simple creative moments every day that give you that sense of joy and fulfillment that you can see in Cadence when she actually sees the reveal of all these creations that she has inspired.
You mentioned chapter 1. This is now chapter 2. I'm assuming, I don't know if it's annual, each year will be another chapter. How do you keep a campaign fresh when it runs for multiple years?
Well, first, we have a lot to say. As you can imagine, we are, Crayola brand, and everyone in the Crayola company is really, really passionate about this. So, and I think, and we also look at what's relevant out there, right? What is really relevant and top of mind for consumers. And, and we really lean into the power of storytelling, because at the end of the day, yes, this is a campaign, this is a brand campaign, but it's also a way to engage consumers of all ages. It's a way of really kind of make it relevant. And I think what better than the power of storytelling to be able to accomplish that. So I think that's going to be the ongoing challenge, but we very much believe that this is so on core with who we are as a brand, as a business. And as we continue to expand and grow in the US, as we continue to expand our global footprint, I think ability to continue to talk about this and continue to elevate the importance of creativity, and to do it through storytelling in a way that really connects with consumers. I just think it's very, very powerful. So we'll continue to find meaningful ways that people care about. It's not just about what we want to say. It's about what they need to hear. Yeah. And let's continue that conversation, that dialogue. And we hope to be able to inspire, kids, parents, adults, teachers out there for many years to come.
Mm-hmm. Always, I guess, keeping creativity just at the heart of every single initiative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a global brand, as you've mentioned. How do you regionalize something like this when you're thinking about engaging with consumers in Asia, Italy, Mexico, the United Kingdom? How do you make it relevant across regions?
Well, I think you just have to, be able to, there's not a perfect formula, as I'm sure you know, right? You have to be able to tap into some universal human truths. But at the same time, you also have to have the flexibility to realize that the campaign might not look identical, right? You have to be able to have a strong core and be able to know exactly what's universal, and to develop it and design it with that in mind, but also, allow the individual markets to be able to to tailor some of the execution and some of those elements in order to be able to really be relevant to the way that you would talk about it in that market, or using the, relevant, examples, or creators or talent or things like that. So it's definitely a combination of starting with the global premise, but then allowing for that localization to make sure it's really relevant and it's appropriate for each market in the way that really would connect to the consumers in each.
So would you brief in a concept, something like what you've done with Cadence, and have it replicated in a country like Italy or Mexico, or are they just really putting their completely own spin on these things?
I think it's a little bit of combination of both. I think it's of both. Is whenever it makes sense, then we might be able to use exactly what we have done. Sometimes we recreate it. Sometimes we just extend it in a different way. There's not a perfect formula, right? Because sometimes those narrative pieces really need to be, you kind of have to say what makes sense. There's not a universal formula, but it could be all of the above depending on what makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, great. Looking ahead, what are you excited about that you're working on next? What should we be watching for from the brand?
Well, I think the campaign for creativity is going to continue to go on. And it's one of the campaigns you had asked me earlier in the interview, like, what are you most proud of? And this is definitely very high on the list, just because it is so meaningful. Both in terms of its importance, but also I just love the message and the critical importance of it. So I think that is one of the things that I'm really very, very proud of. And we'll continue to evolve that. I think ongoing kind of expansion on what else we're going to do within location-based entertainment. We do have some more things up our sleeves in our interactive business, and some more news to come within our app portfolio, and hopefully very near future. What we do in education. I know I mentioned before around Crayola Creativity Week, but last year's program, which was only it's 1 week in January, and it was only our fourth year, we reached 13.2 million kids in over 120 countries around the world. So we have our year 5 coming up in January 2026. So every year I look forward to it, because it's just incredible content, incredible talent that participates. Everything all the content, the standards aligned, very heavy literacy focus, and it's really a celebration of creativity and an ability to teach core content, curriculum, standards aligned learning using hands-on creativity. So really, really proud of that program, and that continues year on year.
Great. Well, I always like to give some practical advice for right now. For starters, who or what are you keeping your eye on in the industry? What are the marketing trends you're spotting, brands that you think are just killing it? Kind of what's on your radar these days?
Well, I think a couple of areas that I especially, pay attention to. One is in the social space, because social is not new, but at the same time, it is nothing but fast moving at all times, right? So the way that it's evolving, the way that you sort of have to build your programs to virality, I think is really, really important, is going to continue to be fast evolving and increasingly important, because I think there's incredible fragmentation, incredible personalization of all the content, sometimes by brand, sometimes self-selected by the consumer. And I think obviously the obvious aspect is AI. And I think what I'm really kind of fascinated by is AI as a kind of as a way and as a tool of helping get work done better, whether it's SEO, whether it's content creation, all those kinds of things. I think those things are a little bit clearer, right? But when you talk about AI sort of on the front end as an experience, right? And how do you use it as a way of giving people courage when it comes to expressing their creativity, and not as, sometimes people talk about, hey, it's going to be a replacement to creativity. Well, is it? Or can we use it in a way that actually becomes an enabler to some people who may not otherwise, get engaged or feel intimidated or not overcome some of those kind of self-perceived judgment or fears that they might have. So I think what that takes shape of, again, not so much in the back end of how to get stuff done better, more efficiently. I think that's already happening. But how do you actually use it on the front end, I think is something really I find fascinating.
Yeah. All right. Final question for you, Vicky. What's the best piece of marketing advice you've ever been given?
I think the one that, and I actually don't even know where I picked it up exactly, but I think the one that I always, I use a lot and use it sort of as my guiding light is this, and I may have mentioned it briefly before, is sometimes as marketers, we get so focused on what we want to say. We're so focused on the brief and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And I think we sometimes just sort of forget a little bit, just put the regular consumer shoes on for a second and forget about what you know as a marketer, forget about that it's your business, and just look at it as a consumer, fresh eyes. And what would you see? What's the experience? How would you experience it? What makes sense? What would you think? And I think it sounds very simple, but that ability to take this hat off and put this hat on, sometimes, I think oftentimes actually, gives you an incredible insight to what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, how would you execute it, what you might be missing, what questions you would have, an ability to sort of tailor your messaging based on, again, not based on what you're trying to say, because it's so easy to focus on that, and more on what it is that people need or want to hear or how they would interpret the message. And importantly, is that message actually going to cause them to do something differently? Because, if I could, cheat a little bit and add a part two to this, is sometimes we get so focused on, well, there's going to be a great message, but are they actually going to change their behavior, right? Is this going to be they're going to look at and say, oh, isn't that nice? And then they move on with their day. But is that actually compelling enough for someone to actually take action and do something differently? And are we sure whatever it is that we're doing, that we're actually reaching that level of standard, that they are convinced enough, compelled enough, inspired enough that they're going to do something differently? And I think that those are to me, those are the two most important things. Make it relevant to them, not to you, and make it compelling enough so that they actually change their behavior.
That's great advice. What is the best place for folks if they want to follow your journey? What's the best place for them to follow you online?
I'll probably LinkedIn.
LinkedIn? Awesome.
Yes,
we'll share that
I
in the show
usually
notes.
share some of the most pivotal, important moments
Awesome.
for the brand.